Autism is no longer rare. Today, 1 in 31 children are diagnosed, and that number keeps rising. But what's even more alarming is how misunderstood that this diagnosis has become. Because online, you'll hear a lot about neurodiversity and being proudly autistic. And listen, we believe in respecting and supporting every single child. But for families navigating the daily realities of level 2 and especially level 3 autism, the truth is that this isn't just a different way of thinking or unique personality traits. These children are struggling with their health in a multitude of ways, and their families are in constant crisis. We're talking about children that can't speak, who can't sleep, who self-injure, scream for hours, and live inside of a trapped nervous system stuck in total overload. And parents who are running on empty, trying to hold it all together. And yet the medical world still says that the root cause is genetic, while the functional medicine world blames the gut. But what if there's something that's even deeper? A foundational neurological issue that actually explains why so many of these kids, they can't connect, they can't regulate, and they can't develop the way that they're meant to. Let me paint a picture of what autism really looks like in 2025. The statistics alone should alarm every parent and healthcare provider, because we've gone from 1 in 10,000 children in the 70s to 1 in 31 today. That's not better diagnoses. That's an epidemic, and it's not slowing down. But here's what's even more concerning. The severity is increasing. We are seeing more level 2 and level 3 cases than ever before. These aren't just children who need a little extra support in school. These are children whose nervous systems are so dysregulated that they can't function in basic daily activities. Now, I've been taking care of these kiddos for the last 5+ years, and what I've learned has completely changed how we understand autism. Now, the 3 levels aren't just arbitrary categories. They're actually roadmaps to understanding the depth of nervous system dysfunction that each child is experiencing. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down the 3 levels of autism, what they really mean for your child's future, and why the fight for understanding the true root cause has never been more important. I want to tell you a story about a kiddo named Luke and his family. A story that perfectly illustrates why understanding these levels is so crucial and why hope is never lost. His mom was always asking herself if her son would ever heal or be the same again. Her beautiful son started regressing at about 13 months. He stopped completely talking. He stopped making eye contact and often inconsolable, had a hard time sleeping, had many sensory challenges, and wasn't connecting well with others. So let me describe what Luke's daily life looked like before we started working together. Because mornings were a nightmare. Luke would wake up screaming and couldn't be consoled for hours. Simple things like getting dressed became battles because every texture felt like sandpaper against his skin. He couldn't tolerate the sounds of the household. The dishwasher, the toilet, the vacuum, or even his siblings talking would send him into complete meltdowns. His mom once told me, "I felt like I was losing my son every single day." The child that I had known for the last 13 months of his life just completely disappeared. And here's what makes this story even more heartbreaking. They were told by multiple specialists that this was just Luke's baseline now. This is who he is. You need to accept it and manage it. But here's what those doctors didn't understand, and what Luke's mom instinctively knew, that there was something deeper going on, because Luke wasn't just different, he was suffering. His nervous system was trapped in survival mode, and every day was a battle just to exist in his own body. And it was extremely difficult for Luke and his family. But being the powerhouse family that they are, they went all in on getting Luke the help that he needed to continue to progress again, and then heal to his full potential. And here's where everything changed. Mom said that he had the biggest impact in his life while having neurologically focused chiropractic care on their side. And mom said Luke was in early intervention, getting therapies there right alongside chiropractic. But chiropractic has been the #1 tool in their toolbox the entire time, because it helped Luke progressively calm and retrain his nervous system so that his body could start connecting and healing on a deeper level. She said that I knew it was working when we started to be able to go back to some of the parts of our life that were taken away when he slipped away from us. The eye contact being able to calm, the being able to regulate, but most especially when he started talking. Mom said that she would never forget the day that Luke said his first words again, because she vividly remembers that Luke saying his first words in the office right after adjustment, and everyone was blown away with excitement. And very soon after, he was able to speak fully. And his journey continued because Luke kept making positive steps forward. And now at 10 years old, mom says that Luke is healed to a degree that she wasn't sure that she would ever get to. That she hoped that they would, that they prayed that they would, that they put in the work to make sure that he would. But you never know. Because now he's healthy, he's happy, he's calm, and he's a 10-year-old that lights up the room whenever he walks in and can talk your ear off. But the thing is that Luke's story isn't unique. It's becoming the new normal when we address the real root cause. Now let's break down what these three levels actually mean, and more importantly, what they mean for your child's potential for healing. So level 1 autism. The DSM-5 categorizes level 1 as requiring support for social communication and inflexible behaviors. These are often the children who used to be called high functioning or Asperger's. But here's what level 1 typically looks like. There's difficulty initiating social interactions. There's challenges with back and forth conversation, inflexibility in behavior and in their thinking, problems organizing and planning, sensory sensitivities that interfere with daily actions. But here's what the DSM doesn't tell you. From a neurological perspective, level 1 autism represents a moderate level of nervous system dysfunction. Now, these children's autonomic nervous systems are stuck in a chronic stress response, but not to the extreme degree that we see in level 2 or level 3. Because when we scan these children with the Insight technology, what we typically see are moderate sympathetic dominance patterns, some vagus nerve dysfunction, and manageable levels of neuroinflammation, and disrupted but not severely compromised motor tone. The good news is that level 1 children often respond beautifully to neurologically focused interventions because their nervous systems haven't been pushed into the extreme dysfunction that we see in more severe cases. Now, level 2 autism. Typically, it says that it's requiring substantial support with more pronounced communication delays and repetitive behaviors. Now, these children have more noticeable difficulties that require significant support to function in daily activities. So the level 2 characteristics include marked deficits in verbal and nonverbal communication, social difficulties that are obvious even with support, inflexibility of behavior that interferes with functioning of day-to-day activities, difficulty coping with change, and more pronounced repetitive behaviors like stimming or flapping or spinning. Now, from a neurological standpoint, level 2 autism shows us a nervous system under much more severe stress. And when we examine these children's scans, we see significant sympathetic overactivity, more pronounced vagus nerve dysfunction, higher levels of neuroinflammation, and a greater disruption in motor tone and coordination. But here's what's fascinating. The gap between level 1 and level 2 isn't just about severity of symptoms, it's about the depth of nervous system dysfunction. Now, these children's brains are working so hard just to survive each day that there's very little bandwidth left for learning, connecting, or developing. Now, level 3 requires very substantial support with severe communication impairments and extremely limited social interaction. These are the children who need round-the-clock care and support for basic daily functions. Now, the characteristics with level 3 are severe deficits in verbal and nonverbal communication, very limited initiation of social interactions, extreme inflexibility of behavior, extreme difficulty coping with change, repetitive behaviors that significantly interfere with day-to-day function. Neurologically speaking, though, level 3 autism represents a nervous system in complete overwhelm. They're completely locked in, and scans typically reveal extreme sympathetic dominance, severe dysfunction to the vagus nerve, and oftentimes damage, high levels of neural inflammation throughout the entire system, and significant disruption in motor tone, often leading to issues like toe walking, stimming, and coordination problems. But here's the crucial point that changes everything. But these levels aren't fixed destinations. They're snapshots of current nervous system function. Because most families are never told that these levels can change over time when the root neurological causes are properly addressed. But they absolutely can. And we see it all the time in our work when the foundation root causes are actually addressed head on. Now let's dive into what's really causing this autism epidemic, because it's not what you've been told. Now, for decades, we have been told that autism is primarily genetic. It runs in families. It's just bad luck in the genetic lottery. But here's the problem with that theory. Genetics take hundreds, if not thousands of years to change. You can't have a genetic epidemic that goes from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 31 in just a few decades. That's not how genetics work. What we're actually seeing is an epigenetic crisis. Environmental factors turning on genetic vulnerabilities that might have stayed dormant under different circumstances. And at our practice, we understand autism through the perfect storm concept. It's a sequential exposure to stressors that overwhelm the developing nervous system. Now, let me walk you through each component. So, the first piece of a perfect storm concept is fertility and prenatal stress. So it starts before your child is even conceived. Now, modern fertility challenges, maternal stress during pregnancy, and prenatal exposure set the stage for nervous system vulnerability. So consider these factors: fertility treatments and interventions, high maternal stress during pregnancy, prenatal infections, maternal autoimmune conditions, and exposure to environmental toxins during critical developmental windows. And here's what's happening neurologically. During fetal development, the nervous system is forming at an incredible rate. Any stress or interference during the critical windows can actually alter the trajectory of neurological development. Step 2 in the perfect storm is birth trauma and interventions. Now, the birth process itself has become increasingly interventive. And those interventions, while sometimes necessary, my son included, can create significant stress on the developing nervous system. Now, common birth stressors include things like induced labor, prolonged labor, forceps or vacuum extractions, emergency C-sections, cord complications, and low birth weight or prematurity. Now, the neurological impact is that the upper cervical spine, the upper neck, and the brainstem are particularly vulnerable during birth. Even minor misalignments or stress within this area can have profound effects on autonomic nervous system function. And let me explain why this is so crucial. The brainstem houses the control centers for basic life functions, like breathing, our heart rate, our digestion, our sleep cycles, and our stress responses. And when birth trauma affects this area, it can set off a cascade of neurological dysfunction that manifests as the symptoms that we call autism. Perfect storm component number 3 is early life toxic overload. Now, after birth, the hits keep coming because modern children are exposed to an unprecedented level of toxins during their most vulnerable developmental periods. Now, these exposures include excessive antibiotics in early life, environmental toxins and chemicals, processed foods and food additives, EMF exposure, over-vaccination in compromised systems, and heavy metal exposure. Now, the compounding effect is that each of these exposures alone might not be enough to trigger autism. But when they happen in sequence, especially in a child whose nervous system is already compromised from prenatal stress and from birth trauma, they create the perfect storm of neurological dysfunction. And here's what happens when these stressors accumulate. The sympathetic fight or flight stuck on stress response gets pushed into overdrive. And the parasympathetic vagus nerve rest, digest, and regulate system is suppressed and almost shut down altogether. Now, this creates a cascade of effects, like disruptive digestion and gut health, because when our vagus nerve isn't functioning properly, digestion suffers. This leads to the gut issues that we see in 80% of our children with autism. There's immune system challenges because a dysregulated nervous system can't properly control immune function, leading to chronic inflammation, frequent infections, and autoimmune responses. The other thing that we see is significant neural inflammation because chronic stress and toxic overload create inflammation within the brain itself, further disrupting neurological function. From the motor and sensory side, this manifests as motor tone issues, coordination problems, sensory sensitivities, and repetitive behaviors that we associate with autism. Sleep and behavior also gets wrecked because a nervous system stuck in survival cannot achieve the deep restorative sleep necessary for brain development or emotional regulation. Now, the severity of each level depends on the timing, the intensity, and the duration of these stressors. Because the earlier a child was exposed to those stressors and the more severe that they were, the stronger the correlation to their level of autism severity later on, which explains why some children require minimal support while others need very substantial assistance. Now, here's where hope enters the picture and where our approach differs dramatically from conventional autism treatment. Now, most interventions for autism focus on managing the symptoms. like speech therapy for communication delays, occupational therapy for sensory issues or fine motor deficits, behavioral therapy for challenging behaviors, medications for anxiety or for hyperactivity. Now, while these interventions can be helpful, they're missing the foundational piece. They don't address the root cause of the nervous system dysfunction that's creating all of these symptoms in the first place. It's like trying to fix a car with engine problems by turning the radio louder. You might not hear the engine knocking, but the problem is still there and getting worse. Now, the most exciting thing for parents and other professionals with our neurologically focused work is that we don't just need to rely on symptoms and surveys to sort out the severity or levels of a child's challenges. We can actually measure the depth and the severity of their nervous system dysfunction and stress and subluxation directly using the insight scanning technology. So let me explain how this works. The first test is what's called the thermal scan. Now, this technology measures temperature patterns all along the spine to identify areas of neuroinflammation and dysfunction. Now, when our nervous system is dysregulated, it shows up as heat patterns that we can measure and that we can track. And what we typically see in our kiddos with autism, level 1, there's moderate temperature variations, usually within the upper neck and the mid-back areas. In level 2, it's more pronounced patterns, often extending through the entire spine. Now in level 3, it's severe, widespread patterns indicating system-wide neuroinflammation or complete exhaustion. Now with surface EMG, these measure disrupted neuromotor tone and coordination by analyzing how well the nervous system is controlling muscle function. Now, the patterns that we observe in autism, level 1, there's some muscle tension and coordination issues, but relatively manageable. In level 2, there's more significant disruption in motor control affecting their posture and their movement. Level 3, severe motor dysfunction, often correlating with stimming, with tics, and toe walking. Heart rate variability testing is one of my favorites for these kids because it measures overall nervous system dysregulation and dysautonomia by analyzing the variation in time between heartbeats. And what heart rate variability tells us about autism is that in level 1, reduced variability is indicating some autonomic dysfunction. In level 2, it's significantly impaired, showing substantial dysautonomia. In level 3, severely compromised variability, indicating that the nervous system is stuck and locked into a constant stress response. Now, these scans give us exactly what depth and severity of neurological dysfunction your child is struggling with. So there's no more guessing. There's no more trial and error. We can see precisely what's happening within their nervous system. Now, based off of their scans, their case history, and the severity, we can finally and fully create a customized and personalized care plan and adjusting protocol for your child's unique and specific needs. There's no more cookie cutter approach to caring for your child with autism that's all too common today. Not only in traditional medicine, but often in the functional or biomedical settings nowadays too. Our doctors are trained in what we term neurometrics, to be able to find the severity of sympathetic dominance, to find the depth of subluxation and vagus nerve damage, and so much more with these insight scans. And here's how we customize care for each kiddo. Most kids, regardless of their autism level, will start within our office 2 to 4 days a week. However, based on their scans and their case history and the severity, we likely start with daily care for 2 to 4 weeks to create that initial momentum in nervous system healing. The reason for this intensive start is when a nervous system has been stuck in dysfunction for months or years, it takes consistent, frequent input to begin shifting those patterns. Think about it like physical therapy after a major injury. You don't just do it once a week and expect rapid results. Now, specifically with level 1, they usually start anywhere from 2 to 4 visits a week, mostly focusing in on our upper neck or the upper cervical spine to improve brainstem and vagus nerve function. And there's specific protocols put in place to address that, as well as giving lifestyle recommendations to support nervous system regulation. Now, these cases oftentimes can use daily care for 2 weeks if scans show significant dysfunction. Now in level 2, it often requires that daily care for 2 to 3 weeks initially. So more intensive adjustment protocols targeting specific areas within the spine to be able to address the vagus nerve and coordinate the care with other providers as needed. Now the best thing ever is that we can track true nervous system healing over time as the care plan progresses and your child starts to make their way out of the storm. So let me show you exactly what this looks like by sharing some actual scan results. So what you're seeing are the actual insight scans that allow for us to measure, to track nervous system function directly and objectively. So let me walk you through what we're looking at and what it means for your child's potential for their healing. So what you're seeing left to right on the left side is what's called the thermal or the neurotherm. Basically, what it's doing is it's measuring hot spots or pockets of heat, of tension, stress, and subluxation. On this middle is a pattern version of what's called our surface EMG. So it's measuring the tone, the tension stock within the neuromotor system, but coincidentally, it's also measuring how much input the brain is having to filter through, process through, just sitting here, not engaging socially, not learning things in an academic setting, or not being introduced to the social demands. On this far right is our favorite when we talk about our spectrum kids. Heart rate variability is a direct measure of vagal tone, so how well our vagus nerve is functioning, as well as a great measure of the stress and rest side of our nervous system. So when we're looking at the thermal, this is a deeper view that we'll pull out. What you're seeing in the middle part of it is the asymmetry, so where the hot spots are on either side of the spine. In this part right here within the neck, impacting brainstem, vagus nerve areas, is this big, significant pattern of stress, tension, and subluxation up top, interfering with the way that the vagus nerve is able to calm, regulate the entire system. What you're also seeing here is two really big patterns at the elimination and the stress response area. So this is our major digestive center. This is also where elimination, filtration, our adrenals, and our kidneys live. Now, why that pattern specifically is so significant is two things. Where things shift across the spine from side to side is a deeper pattern of stress and subluxation onto the system, and it's also confirmed by what we're seeing on this secondary view. Now, when I explain this secondary pattern to parents, it's what's called the DTG. All that that means is it's looking at the depth of our nervous system. So where these things collapse inward on side to side, that is where the biggest depth of neurological dysfunction and disorganization is taking place within the entire body. What you're seeing too is almost at the bottom of that on this surface EMG, which again, this is measuring the neurological noise that the brain is having to process through at all periods of time. What you're seeing is that almost at the bottom of that is where things start to become more exhausted and dysfunctional down within the lower spine. The big metric that I love measuring here, or there's two really big metrics, but the big one is the total energy index. If you remember, 150 and below is kind of the range that I like to see with our kiddos. So seeing this one pop up at 350, it's double the amount of activity and input that the brain's having to filter through and process through at all times. The pattern percentage is a little bit higher, and the symmetry percentage is a little bit higher than what we will see with most kiddos. But really, anything below 50 is a big measure of disorganization and dysfunction within our nervous system because we want things to be very symmetrical and vase shaped. So smaller up top, a little bit wider into the core, and then down smaller into the bottom of the spine. Same thing on both sides. Now, that big black line that you're seeing all the way from top to bottom that's real blown out, that's actually measuring the amplitude of muscle activity. So the tone, the tension, the dyspneic, the dysautonomic tone stuck within the musculature and within the nervous system. Now, heart rate variability is that gold standard test that we love to use. That's measuring vagal tone, which is the big one for our kiddos in terms of socialization, emotional regulation, and internal feelings of safety. But also, it's measuring what we like to call within the practice the balance between our fight or flight gas pedal and our parasympathetic brake pedal. So, what we're seeing from side to side is gas pedal on the left, brake pedal on the right. Sympathetic fight or flight, parasympathetic rest and digest. The top to bottom measurement is one of my favorites because really what we're talking about is the body's reserves or their healing capacity. So due to the stress, if this little white dot
is way down here, which oftentimes for a lot of these kiddos it is, unless they're heavily medicated, or oftentimes with pandas, we will see a artificially elevated heart rate variability. But what we are seeing is that due to the stuck stress onto the system, the body is bogged down and weighed down. So heart rate variability in combination with the thermal, primarily that DTG view, is going to show us the depth of the severity of neurological dysfunction within the nervous system to be able to set the stage for us with crystal clear clarity as to what we need to do moving forward to get these kiddos out of the storm. And additionally, the scans utilizing the neurometrics and progressions throughout care allows us to make sure that our care is not just addressing the symptoms or surface level problems, but actually getting to the deeper layers of real, true root cause healing.
So let me share a story that perfectly illustrates the power of addressing nervous system dysfunction at its root. So this was a level 3 kiddo. A 5-year-old boy came into our office diagnosed with level 3 autism. He was completely nonverbal, had severe self harming and self injuring behaviors, and couldn't tolerate any changes in routine without complete meltdowns. Now, his initial scans showed exactly what we expected: severe neuroinflammation throughout his entire system, extremely poor motor control, and an HRV pattern that indicated that his nervous system was in constant crisis mode. But here's what happened with our intensive care approach. We started with an intensive phase of daily care for 2 weeks. Now, this allowed for us to create rapid momentum in calming his dysregulated nervous system. And just 3 weeks after completing that intensive phase, the breakthrough came. He was stringing 2 to 4 word phrases together, expressing his needs for the first time, and he counted to 20 for the first time in his life. And his mom told me, "You gave us our son back." We went from barely surviving each day to actually enjoying time with our child. And what this case shows us is that when we address the neurological root cause with the right intensity and the right frequency, the nervous system can heal remarkably quickly. This child's brain was ready to develop and connect, it just needed the neurological interference removed first. So, what do success stories like this have in common? We addressed the foundational nervous system dysfunction that was creating the autism symptoms rather than just managing the symptoms themselves. Because when we restore proper nervous system function, communication pathways start to open up, sensory processing begins to normalize, emotional regulation improves, and social connections become possible, as well as learning and development start to accelerate. Now, this isn't about curing autism. It's about giving each child's nervous system the support that it needs to function optimally, allowing their natural potential to be able to emerge. And if you've made it this far in the video, I know that you're serious about finding real answers for your child. And let me tell you exactly what your next step should be. Stop accepting the limitations. Because first, I want you to understand something crucial. The levels of autism are not permanent destinations. They're descriptions of current nervous system function, and nervous system function can change. So don't let anyone tell you that this is just who your child is, that you need to accept their limitations, or that they'll never be able to blank. Because your child's potential is not limited by a diagnosis, it's limited by the current state of their nervous system, and that can be improved. So here's what I want you to do right now. Check out the link within our bio to be able to learn more about the levels of autism and how neurologically focused chiropractic care may help your child and entire family experience a much improved quality of life. Now, if you're local to our office, call to schedule your consult. We're going to discuss your child's history, their current challenges, and whether our approach might be right for your family. And if you're not in our area, use the PX Docs directory to find a qualified neurologically focused chiropractor near you. Not all chiropractors are trained in this specialized approach, so make sure that you find someone with proper certification. And share this information with other parents who might benefit, because too many families are suffering in silence and accepting the limitations that don't have to be permanent. Now, when you take this next step, here's what you can expect. In our initial consultation, we'll go through your child's complete history: pregnancy, birth, early development, and the current challenges and previous interventions. We'll use the insight scanning technology to objectively measure your child's nervous system function and identify areas of dysfunction. And based on the scan results and your child's specific needs, we're going to create a personalized plan designed to address their unique neurological challenges. And then we'll regularly rescan to be able to track improvements and adjust the care plan or the adjusting protocols as your child's nervous system begins to heal. Now, I know some of you might be thinking about the cost, the time, the commitment, or whether this will really work for your child. But let me put this into perspective. What is it worth to give your child the best possible chance at reaching their full potential? What would you pay to see your nonverbal child speak their first words? To watch your overwhelmed child finally find peace? To see your isolated child finally make their first friend? This isn't about managing autism, it's about unlocking your child's neurological potential. Because the earlier that we intervene, the better the outcomes. And every day that passes with a dysregulated nervous system is another day of missed development and deepening dysfunction. I want to leave you with this thought. Your child came into this world with incredible potential. And the perfect storm may have disrupted their nervous system development, but that doesn't mean their story is over. Because every day in our office, we see children surpassing the limitations that others placed on them. We see families getting their lives back. We see hope restored. And your child deserves that chance too. Don't wait for them to just grow out of it, because children don't grow out of nervous system dysfunction. They grow deeper into it unless we address the root cause. So click the link in our bio right now. Learn more about how neurologically focused chiropractic care could be the missing piece in your child's healing journey, because your child's potential is waiting to be unlocked, and let's unlock it together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.